right, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Hello, welcome to the Courtenay Turner Podcast. I am back with Dr. Karen Siegemund, a dear friend of mine and the president of American Freedom Alliance. How are you doing today?
Well, aside from everything else, I'm great. Thanks.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before I pressed record about lots of issues that are currently plaguing this country. So I know that that's like a one-word answer for you, but maybe we could maybe you could start telling me, what do you think are some of the things that are the biggest issues we're facing currently?
Daily, everything that we're hearing about what's going on is just feels so catastrophic. It's hard to contain them all. So I guess what I would say overall is America isn't America anymore. I feel really strongly that we've come very far from what America was originally designed to be, intended to be. Almost all of our founding tenets have been completely thrown out the window. We've gotten so far from the Constitution. We've gotten, just this morning, it came out of the White House that we ought not call it the Biden administration anymore, as administrations have always been, but it's the Biden-Harris administration. So there's already a deconstruction of the office of the presidency, right? Yeah. Just from the top. I mean, this is literally word
so they
from
one
the White
person
House
now. Unity. So are they one person now? They kept saying unity.
They're one person, which one of the things that I posited on Facebook, does that mean if we impeach one, we impeach them both?
That would be great.
Right? Because if they're equally responsible for the office of the presidency, when you impeach whoever holds that off, the person holding the office.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so if it's both of them sort of co-joined, holding that office, does that mean, you're both out of here? And I get it. That means Nancy Pelosi is next in line. We'll deal with that next. I'm not going to let that, stop any action that we need to take against Biden-Harris, of which there are plenty. But so that's just the most recent piece of destroying the foundation.
Did they say why they're calling it the Biden-Harris administration?
Of course, no.
Oh, okay.
No, what would they say? Because the man can't be president.
Right.
I mean, even he calls her President Harris. So maybe it's just to sort of slough over the fact that even he sees her as president. And this is an interesting way to sort of finesse it.
Right.
I don't know, but he clearly cannot be president. We knew he couldn't be president. We knew he wasn't elected president. We know he can't act as president. Nothing coming out of the White House is from him. It's all, the agenda that they've had forever. And whatever he signs, again, without making any announcements, she's always hovering over with a mask. And China calls us clowns. Russia withdrew their ambassador. I mean, the chaos that he's wreaking, the weakness that he's projecting is, whatever one felt about Trump, you project strength, period, because that's your job. That's your job. You're protecting, defending the people of the United States and upholding the Constitution, but you have to project strength, or else you're vulnerable. This isn't about who's a nice guy. This is about who we look to protect the American people. And Biden, with his every word, breath, deed, stumble, literally projects nothing but weakness. I called him the other day. I said, he's so far from being an alpha male, he's not even a beta male. He's actually kind of an omega, which is the last letter of the alphabet. And he does that on purpose. I mean, on bended knee, to quite literally, right? He's on the steps, not once, not twice, but 3 times he falls. And that, which I find tragic. We laugh, but it's actually tragic that we would put this aging, elderly, a man with dementia, with physical problems in this position. But all of that was horrible. But what struck me even worse, if anything can be worse, he got to the top of the steps and he turns around, he's all alone and he's wearing a mask. And I thought, what more says, I am afraid of absolutely everything. Yeah. I'm afraid of everything. And how does the president of the United States of America, literally the leader of the free world,
yeah,
right? He's the guy. America is where people around the globe look for strength, for freedom, for protecting their freedoms if they are freedom fighters.
Yep.
And to have a guy be head of that icon of freedom project weakness in every possible way is one of the most destructive, scary things, both for people within the country, from enemies within, but also, people are just gleefully rubbing their hands and saying they're going to lead with a white flag.
Yeah,
we are leading with a white flag.
And also, I think that the people who look to us to protect them,
right.
So many countries have looked to us to be the ones to defend them from, their enemies and from those who are robbing them of their freedoms and their safety.
Right. And we saw this with Obama, how I think it was Poland. He withdrew our forces from Poland, which, I'm sorry, the world, geopolitics is a real thing. And, it's not just, we weren't being very nice. No, it's actually very akin, to segue to another issue, to defunding the police.
Well, before you get to that, I think it's very interesting when you talk about geopolitics, the people really want to talk about globalism when it serves their agenda.
Right. That's a great point.
Let's be nice. We're all one. It's one world, one people. But
right.
The flip side of that is that we are all interconnected, and humanity is not simple and all nice and Care Bears and rainbows. So when you're dealing with geopolitics, that means you really have to deal with the conflicts that lie within being such an interconnected globe.
That's a really so great and important point, because the idea of globalism says that somehow when all the bad guys are gotten rid of, we will all live in peace and harmony. And that premise is when all the bad guys are gotten rid of, because you will never get rid of all the bad guys, because everybody becomes a bad guy at some point, right? We all, you're mean to me, you're mean to my kids. All of a sudden now I'm a bad guy to you. So it's imagine a world without borders. I'm sorry, but somebody's going to put up a border. So it's nonsensical, this utopianism. As long as they're bad guys, you need to have people to fight against them.
Yep.
And we may not like that that's us, but it is us. And my question is, okay, if it's not us, who would you rather it be? Well, why does it have to be anybody? Because it will be somebody. And it could be somebody who doesn't act as a good guy, but who takes advantage of a vacuum that we may create. So which would you rather have? In World War II, we sided with Stalin. Oh my gosh, that's such a horrible thing. Yeah. And together we defeated Hitler. Okay, so you make allies. The world is a complex place. You can see it as black and white, but you often have to operate in the gray.
Yep.
You just do. Would we have rather sided with Switzerland? That would have been lovely. And then we would all be speaking German. And, you have to do things that are
and the truth is that there is never a neutral.
Sometimes unpleasant to get to the bigger goal. But yeah, to your point about globalism, it's all lovely to think about, but the reality is we're never all going to get along. I know people who I don't get along with. Why should countries get along together? And it's really important. I live this. I have this in my head all the time. The opposite of war is not peace. It's surrender. Yep. And so if you want to surrender to people who are bad guys, hate-filled, destructive, you find your favorite thing to be worried about. If you don't want to surrender to them, then you do have to stand up to them. And of course, we'd all rather not have conflict, but if they want conflict, what are you going to do? We're never the ones who start the wars.
Yep.
But we are there, as you said, for the people who do want to be free, and we will support them, be it in war or in peace or in policy or in money, or you just know that we're here. When we had AFA had our Global Freedom Movements Conference last October, and AFA had our Global Freedom Movements Conference last October, and we had people from all around the world coming to speak about what they're doing for freedom, either within their country or if they're part of their country's governance. And almost every speaker said, we feel stronger in our stance and more able in our stance because of President Trump in the White House. And now, every one of those people feels more despair.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that before the election. There were so many people from around the globe who were so invested in what was going to happen. And I found that, I got it, but I also found it really fascinating. I mean, I try to stay afloat of, what's going on, but I mean, I'm not like deep diving into what's happening in every country's, elections and policies. And these people really were from all over the world, but especially on the West. They were really, really concerned. People from Australia, from Canada, England, really just on the edge of their seats. What's going to happen?
Deeply concerned. And you were in Washington on January 6th, as was I. And the biggest presence of, stands and booths and signs that was one cohesive thing was the anti-Chinese Communist Party.
Yep.
People who were absolutely terrified of a left-wing, yet another left-wing nation on the globe who's not going to stand up against communism. And it's really scary to just be one of those, and to be yet another left-wing country that doesn't stand up for freedom and against tyranny. Instead, we've got coddling. And when China calls you a bunch of clowns, which they did,
Yep.
and when China gets on a high horse against us for racism, whatever, which we know that's all garbage, but that they feel empowered to chastise us. That's what's really scary. With Trump, they may have laughed, but nobody took that kind of a stand.
Exactly. And to your point about Switzerland, this is one of my pet peeves, because the idea of neutrality is really, it's another utopia. Nobody's neutral.
Yeah.
You can't be neutral. Human beings they can only see through their perspective. You're never going to be neutral. You always have interests, you have needs, you have desires. And because nations are comprised of individuals, the same goes for them. You're never going to be neutral.
Exactly. You can't, as long as there's evil, and I think it was Elie Wiesel said this, as long as there's evil, you can't be neutral, because neutral gives power to evil. The only thing that fights evil is overtly good. And for us to abdicate that position, yes, I wish we hadn't sided with Stalin either. So it goes,
Right.
There was a common enemy, and that's the way it goes. It's just so funny, not funny, but World War II, we did stay out of it. We stayed out of it, and we stayed out of it, and stayed out of it. And we didn't choose to be good over evil. We chose to, Europe, we're just not going there anymore. And imagine if Japan hadn't bombed Pearl Harbor. I mean, thank goodness, because it's what brought us in. And it's a horrible thing, but as long as there are horrible people willing to do horrible things, you have to stand up to it. That's all there is. That's all there is to it. And that's, there's different levels of horrible. There's bombing, there's canceling, there's being mean to you. So, we have to decide where on the spectrum it requires us to step in or frightens us enough to get out. Right. The harsher they get, the left gets, the more people just go, oh, I'm not going there.
Right. So, and arguably that's the more reason to step in and to stand up.
That's how I see it. And I know that's how you see it.
Yeah.
Courage. It shouldn't require courage to do a lot of the things that we do, but somehow it does. And they raise the stakes all the time. But the more they raise the stakes, to me, and I think to you, the more we realize we have to speak out and speak up.
I've been thinking a lot about this. My tweet this morning was that, or maybe yesterday, that we have a pandemic of cowardice. I know you've heard me say this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And we do, for sure. But I've been thinking about where this cowardice stems from, and I think a lot of it, typically when you talk about like in personal development, you talk about being committed to your purpose, your sense of why. And I think because we have been so disconnected from as you said, the founding tenets of this nation, our founders were willing to take such risks, which were the stakes were way higher for them than they are for us. But because they were so deeply committed to why it was important to stand for freedom. And I think that it doesn't require much courage if your why is right. What did Nietzsche say? Anybody who, knows it, I'm going to mess it up, but, it is committed to his why can, find any how.
Right.
They'll find any how. And it doesn't require a whole lot of courage to figure out the how and to combat whatever is standing in the way. If you have like that sense of purpose deep in your heart,
yeah,
you know that's more important. But I think because people really don't know, and I think most people, the other pandemic is lack of purpose these days. I think there's definitely a pandemic of lack of purpose. And so therefore it does require courage because people don't know why they're standing up.
No, but I completely agree. But during the riots, not the January 6th.
Right. Yeah.
That wasn't a riot. We're agreed on that. But the Black Lives Matter terrorism that was happening throughout the summer, I think one reason that all happened was it did give people purpose.
Yeah, it filled the void of lack of purpose. I agree.
It really did. And and this is, what's going on in the country. But one of the things that scares me the most right now on an entirely different level is the more they demonize us, and they do this with every breath, and every time they demonize Trump, they demonize us, right? The shooting that just happened, not the one in Colorado, but the last week, the Asian, sex, the massage parlor sex work, whatever it was. This was hate crimes against Asians, which of course had nothing to do with anything, but it allowed them to put it on the back of Trump because he called it the China, whatever. If there's a way to attribute it to Trump, they're going to do it. Not only to go after Trump, but to go after us. So what they're actually doing is and think back. We read about the Holocaust, we read about Hitler, and we read it and we think, God, if I had been there, I would have stood up, against these Nazis. They were really horrible. And the Holocaust, I would have absolutely stood up. I know I would have. I I read about it, and if only I had been there, I would have done something. But now they're given an opportunity. We know, well, actually, now they're being given that opportunity.
Yep.
Now, painting us as the bad guy, they are being given that opportunity to act out that righteous social justice warrior, that righteousness, that purpose, that's saving the country from the bad guys, who's us. And there's going to be a conflagration of that, because that really, I was chased out of a store, mask related stuff, by a guy who was really angry. It's so funny. He's chasing me out of the store. I'm walking away. I'm just, I'm not messing with you. You're actually a little bit scary. And he's filming me. He's filming me. I'm walking out and he's filming me, and he goes, "There she goes. There goes Karen." And I thought, oh my God, how does he know my name? But obviously, anyway, that's just an aside, right? But and you can say that he was a coward because he was wearing a mask, except to him, he was acting from a position, he felt he was the strong one, keeping his community safe,
right,
from evil people like me. And I know that that's what they're instilling in people. So yes, there's a pandemic of a lack of purpose, but it's being filled by the left in sick, weird, twisted, backwards, harmful ways. And he felt he was being courageous, chasing after a Karen. But I really do think that they are tapping into people's innate need to have purpose, to do good, to right wrongs, to be fair, which are all things that we think are important.
Yep.
But they've taken that and filled it with the do good is to make sure everybody's healthy and wears a mask. And we get rid of the racist, homophobic, white supremacist Trump supporters. They have courage. They're willing to speak truth to power, which is complete crap because they have all the power. And they're going to unite and do it and stand tall and feel really good about it. And everything that they're told, and righting wrongs, right? The whole Black Lives Matter thing is, America was born on the back of slavery. And so it all fits beautifully into human needs.
It does. And sorry, finish your thought.
And so they're exploiting our human needs for these good things.
Yeah. And
they're exploiting people's need to express compassion. We come back to compassion all the time. So yeah, that really scares me, that they're exploiting the best of us, the best of our human nature, in order to destroy the best of us,
which
who really want.
Sociopaths do, right?
Right.
There's a misconception that sociopaths are devoid of empathy. And the truth of it, some psychopaths maybe, but most sociopaths actually have incredible empathy. The difference is they don't connect to it. They use it to manipulate.
Exactly.
And it's so deeply that they know exactly what cards to pull and how to manipulate, what strings to pull to manipulate you. And
exactly. And that it's such a bizarre set of circumstances, right? They are very well able to tap into needs, but only to exploit. Only to exploit them, which harms them, and they exploit them to also harm us. And it's just tiers upon tiers of destruction. The whole letting children decide for themselves if they want to take irreversible drugs or whatever that are irreversible, for puberty blockers and so on, because they're empathetic, and it serves their purpose of destroying society's standards, mores, everything to get to identity. So it's destructive on every level. It's destructive of the children, it's destructive of policies, it's destructive of culture, it's destructive of society, it's destructive. And then it's more destructive because we are also demanded to go along with this destructive construct and say, oh yeah, no, it's fine. Johnny's now Jane, and she's much happier this way. And we're supposed to agree with it. So yes, there's always a kernel of something that's the better nature that's then exploited for, I was going to say nefarious purposes. It is nefarious, but it is evil. There's just no other way around it.
Yeah. And when you're talking about the lack of purpose, I think it's really interesting because I think about, I don't know if you've seen, I think I've told you the film Arguing the World about the New York intellectuals.
Oh.
So what's really interesting, just that's relevant to this, is about when the communists came to the United States, a little over 100 years ago, and they went into New York City and they went into the ghettos and they were trying to recruit, and they couldn't get so in the ghettos, it was like the Irish, the Italians, and the Jews mostly,
Right.
At that time, that's mostly who, was in the ghettos. And the Irish and the Italians would have none of it because it required them, because Marxism, communism required them to denounce their religion. Catholicism has taken a very big left turn.
Oh my goodness.
But back then, they could see that it rejected everything their religion was predicated upon, and so they wouldn't have anything to do with it. But the Jews, who desperately wanted to assimilate, and a lot of them were more secular, said sure.
Right.
And the reason it reminds me of this, when you're talking about this, how the left fills this void of purpose, is that I think we have become such a secular society, and so people don't have purpose, because as human beings, you need to subscribe to some sort of universal moral ideal. And if you don't have that, you're searching for something to fill that. And that's what the left is prescribing to fill that void.
Well,
and I think they're able to do it because they've destroyed so many of the religious institutions, or spiritual.
Right. That's really interesting about the Jews. And the others not having any of it, but about the void of purpose. Mm-hmm. Not only are they exploiting it, they're the ones who created it in the first place.
Yes,
right. They literally are the ones who create
those institutions, and so therefore people don't have any
on purpose
moral ideals to subscribe to. Yeah.
Right. And the idea of we can manage just fine without it. A, we know that's not true, and B, they know that's not true. They know that that's not true. That if you remove, just to simplicity's sake, God from people's lives, we don't just, it's not like, running your finger or scooping a bucket of water out of the ocean and it all just closes over it and we're all sort of the happier for it. It's not like that. And they know that. They know that when you remove God, I've heard this expression. I think it's wonderful. I don't know if she made it up or not, Kate. You create a God-shaped hole. There's a God-shaped hole that's created, and they know that, which is why they do it. So it's not even that they think
that. It was so great.
Right? It's really so when they do this on purpose, it's not so that we'll all be better or happier, and it's not so that society doesn't need it. They know it's needed.
Right.
They know it's needed, which is why they create it, and then they fill it.
Yeah.
Then they fill it, and so and then you get people marching and burning buildings and feeling like now they have purpose, and now they are valued, and now they are doing good and sticking it to the bad guys, which again, it's the opposite is true. So when you bottom line is, when you've destroyed people's identity and killed their purpose and taken God out of their lives and society, so it's harmful, it's destructive, it's on purpose. Bad things happen as a consequence. But the good side, the silver lining in that is that these are fixable.
Yes.
Right? Once you see how they're able, what they do to gain power, we can fight those things. We can put God back in. We can give purpose. We can show the difference between good and evil. We can teach gratitude. We can show where what actually the bad things are that need to be fought against. We can do that if we choose to, and of course it takes courage.
It's so interesting to me as you were speaking this. I mean, I've certainly had this thought before, but it seems so crystal clear. This is literally like a repeat of the 19th century. Right? Like,
oh yeah,
God is dead, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so all these voids that were created, there are differences, absolutely. I'm not saying this is exactly the same, but
no, but echoes and yeah.
Well, yes, the echoes, and I like that terminology better because it is the echo, the ripple effect.
Yeah.
There are variations of it, and each frequency is slightly different.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we do just have to go through this periodically. I don't know. Maybe we do. Maybe we need the reminder. Maybe we get complacent. Maybe we think, conservatives, we've said over the last 10 years that I've been hearing this, I wanted to go to this event, but I was, well, I'll give two examples. But I had a dog grooming appointment. I'm sorry, that's your decision. I go a different way, and those ones really annoy me. But what?
You couldn't reschedule the dog grooming?
I know, no. It's hard to get a good dog grooming appointment. My dog groomer is, special. And or we've done this. My kids play softball that morning, and that we tend to feel that if we put our own house in order, everything is going to flow beautifully from that. And we live according to our beliefs and ideals. Family comes first, taking care of our kids, or we go to church. We do all of that stuff for ourselves, and I think that's great and wonderful. They don't, though, and I don't mean they don't watch their kids at games, but that's not number one. The fight is number one. And again, just like the bad guys and global politics, if there are bad guys, you have to fight the bad guys. You don't get to just do softball. Definitely do softball, but at some point you have to find a way also to be engaged. Or maybe you have good friends who are engaged. Just at a certain point, we're all going to be drawn in, I think, and the fewer who stand up puts more burden on those who do.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
I don't know. There are lots of ways to fight, and supporting good cultural things is definitely one of them. Going to church is definitely one of them. Not real church, not church of leftism as they've become.
Right.
That's just empowering them again. So
and I don't believe that every person needs to have religion in their lives, but to strip it from those that hold it so dear, and who it is their spiritual guidance and their moral compass, to strip them of that, you are leaving a God-shaped hole, and that is going to create chaos. It is going to create a breeding ground for somebody most likely with malevolent intentions to fill it.
Right, exactly. It will be filled, and it creates an opportunity. What was the old saying? The idle hands are the devil's playground, or something.
Yes.
Right. This is that, but writ large and deliberately.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not everybody has to be in the same fight, and obviously not everybody has to defend religion or be religious, but Right. When it's stripped, when you're denied it, when it's taken out of not just private lives, but public life,
Yeah.
deliberate secularization, it does cause a problem. And it's protected by the Constitution, that freedom of religion, right?
Yep.
We're allowed to have it. And I've had people argue, oh, but that also means freedom from religion. I don't see where it said that. And you're free to not have religion, but you're not really free to take it from me.
Exactly. So the
So
freedom from religion means you don't have to participate.
you don't have
You
to
are
participate.
not allowed to take it from somebody else.
Right.
You're not
But
allowed
then they
to
go on the
interfere with
wall.
them
But
having their religion. Yeah.
right. Nobody's saying thou shalt be religious.
Yeah.
I don't remember it saying that in the Bible.
No, probably not. So what are
No.
some of the other things that we think are the most pressing?
Yeah. Kind of everything. I guess it does come down to well, if it's about the destruction of America, because I do think that is what it is, we're seeing all of this through the lens of the pandemic and Biden. We're seeing the death of risk taking, Biden at the top of the steps. We in every way, we're killing the idea of risk. We've seen this for a long time, right? You have to sign disclaimers, and in a way, it's the left, but it's also a lot of our legal situation. Anybody is liable for anything, and all of it makes things more complicated, and it adds a really complex element to the idea of risk. But imagine, think back to Columbus, for starters, to the Mayflower, to all the settlers. They were gigantic risk takers, and now we've been drumming that out of us. And that scares me, who we've become as a people. And that really goes to how we feminized culture so completely.
So one little thing about the whole risk thing,
Yeah.
This whole country was founded by people who were risk takers.
Yeah.
This whole breeding out risks is really, really dangerous, because there's actually a gene for risk taking. It's the RDR4 with the 7th allele.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So theoretically, Americans should be, I would think, the largest population with that gene. But
yes.
Keep, if there is any evolution, there is at least, genetics and epigenetics. We know that. You keep breeding it out, then you're going to have people, it's already a very small population who have that gene, and it's a recessive gene. So how many more people are going to be able to carry that through? And you're going to have, most people are risk adverse. That's because they're prone for survival, right? So so as human beings, we don't want to take risks, because that's a endangerment to our potential survival. So yeah, but there's also risk that promotes survival, and that is necessary for survival. And we need some people to be those risk takers to pave the way, so that other people can live in comfort. And we see that in this country. But I think that it's really destructive and devastating, not just, from the conceptual, but literally,
Literally.
Yeah.
And literal, that's absolutely fascinating. I need to look into that. But Americans, as you said, and when I, Mayflower and all of that, we were self-selecting risk takers.
Yep.
Our settlers, everyone, and they were people who came here knowing full well the risks. And that includes the ones who came over early. It includes the Oregon Trail people. It includes the California Gold Rush people. It includes, Texas. Anybody who settled anywhere that was inhospitable, which is, the whole North, would have had those risk-taking genes. And yeah, now we're many generations into risk aversion, but there's also risk, the idea of, if I don't take this risk, is all about, if I do this, well, it's not all about it, but
It's
this is
weighing
how
out.
I am now. And if I don't take this risk, it'll be worse. So they took risks for this, for an ideal. It wasn't even physical safety, right? So it was the pilgrims, whatever they were called. They were living okay. They just didn't have the kinds of freedoms that were important. So they didn't come over here to escape something that was putting them physically at risk. They came over for a different kind of need, and were willing to risk everything for that, as our whole Adams and Washington and Hancock, all the founding, everyone who signed the Declaration of Independence, they took an unbelievable risk. They were traitors. They were treasonous.
Yep.
And they knew that, but they didn't do this from a position of, we got nothing to lose. They had everything to lose. They had everything to lose. So the kind of risk that they took, again, was for a bigger purpose. And they were willing to do it, not just for themselves, but to create this other whole thing that now, to your point, we're breeding out. We're breeding out, we're losing it, or we're seeding it, I guess.
Yeah.
So when I talk about we're losing America in this way, it's also with the full knowledge of the risks and the sufferings and the blood shed in the beginning and all the way through, in order for us to have what we have. And we're still throwing it away. So all those risks that were taken by those great men, never has there been a revolution by people who had everything. Revolutions are usually, we've tried it all and we're still starving to death. And so this is what we're going to do. Ours is the only one that was ever like that. And it was founded on principles of freedom, not like the French liberté, but our own sense of it. And they took unbelievable risks. And now we have Joe Biden falling up the stairs alone with a mask.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't laugh.
I know.
It's really tragic, but it is also just, yeah. I mean, it is.
It's surreal.
Yeah, it's surreal. That's it, exactly. It's like a Dada painting.
It really is. Who could have? I'm sure they've spun in their graves, enough over the centuries. But right now, they died for this. They struggled for this. They fought for this. Anyone who fought and died, in World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and, in Afghanistan and Iraq, you name it, for this. It's such a tragedy. And when people wear this as we're doing the right thing because America has been terrible, their souls are full of wrong and hate and shame, which always makes me sad. So everything that their whole lives are premised on is false and hurtful, and that's been done deliberately. And then when they pass that on to kids, but again, that show, I'm just horrible, but it shows where we can shine a light, where we can fix, where we can do things. We can teach pride in America. We can, just for starters, pride in America, and the value of freedom and what is important to you, and getting kids to see how unbelievably fortunate they are to be here, however they are here. But I'm back to the things that got me fired. So Just keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
But we have done all of Western civilization, but certainly America has, when you give strength to people who want freedom, I don't see how that's a bad thing.
No, I don't either. And that is an interesting point, to teach children how to be grateful to be American. It's very
Yeah.
interesting to me because I remember that was a very distinct thought I had at a really young age. I mean, I remember being like 4, 5, 6, thinking, I'm so lucky that I was born here. You know,
Yeah.
and the chances, that of all the places in the world that I could have been born, and of all the parents I could have had, that
Yeah.
I'm here, and that I
Yeah.
had, certainly with all of my challenges, that I had all of these opportunities, and that I had, all this, I had so many resources that I wouldn't have had necessarily elsewhere. And I remember being so grateful that was, I mean, that was, talk about luck, or, if you're religious, that was like, I was blessed,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was cursed with these challenges, but I mean, I was blessed to have resources to be able to
Right.
surmount them,
Right.
and kids today are not taught that. And I don't even think I was too young to have been taught it, in the sense of, this is what your founding fathers gave you,
Right. 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 Right.
it
Right.
was just, but it was inculcated, and it was, imparted through the values. And that's something, so because I think this is something we talk about when we're thinking about, like, how conservatives what they can do. And a lot of times, there's this, well, we can educate, and that gets, I think we should do that. I'm not, undermining
Yeah. Yeah.
that, but I think there is something a little bit more simple. Not everybody wants to, or has a capacity for, the most in-depth education on our history, although I encourage it for everyone, including children. But really simple things, like just, starting in the home with values,
Right.
is really powerful, I think.
And even just gratitude. I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about being proud to be an American, but I've been saying for a while, and I keep meaning to have these bumper stickers made up, grateful to be an American.
Well, and that was my point. As a kid, I was so grateful of all
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Proud,
here.
whatever, but grateful. And I think that has an entirely different ethos if you have that on your car. From, proud is, we're supremacists, but we're just lucky as hell. We
Yep.
are so lucky to be an American, grateful to be an American. Yeah, I mean, gratitude is something we need to talk about a lot more as conservatives, but also, as you say, in the home, those lessons, all the basic values, and yes, the history as far as the education piece goes, but values, of course. And we don't talk about values in any way, shape, or form. Any honesty, integrity, loyalty, faithfulness. Pick your favorite ones. We don't.
Virtues.
Those aren't in our virtues. Those aren't in our lexicon anymore at all. And if we pepper our discourse more with that, virtues, values, exactly. We should be doing that. Use the word pride. Use the word not pride. Gratitude.
And
Loyalty.
it's a direct combatant to the grievance, right? Because what the left is,
Oh, absolutely.
Victimhood, and
it's not exactly
very hard to be a victim if you're grateful, right?
Well, and
that's the opposite, right?
And that's why they're killing it.
Yes.
It's not just that's exactly why. That's exactly why they kill it, and that's exactly why we should resurrect it, because they are exact opposites, and they do play to the whole. The more you create a sense of victimhood, and that's all, again, back to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
You're victims, and if you're not a victim, somebody else is a victim, and so standing up for victims is the right thing. There's your purpose again. So, and this is how you can be it's all just a crazy mental game that they do with people. You're a victim, so fight against your victimhood and go burn down this building and steal these televisions, and that'll show, it's crazy
because you're entitled.
because you're entitled, right? And entitlement and gratitude are, of course, exactly the opposites as well. So the more we uphold, that's not really the right word, hold up, I guess is better, those virtues, the harder they will have to fight. But yeah, it's really kind of a mess, isn't it?
It is, because I think, when I ask, like, what are the big things that are plaguing America, I look at it as kind of two, in the broad sense, two really big battles. And I kind of go back and forth on which are the bigger ones, because they're kind of pretty parallel. So I think we have the culture battle. And I think that is really, like, I we were talking about how I just wrote an article on critical race theory, and I really believe that that will be the death of America if we do not fight back, because
Absolutely.
as you were talking about, our founding fathers, the only ones who ever fought a revolution like that, and it's
Right.
because every other revolution was based on class struggle. It was traditional Marxist, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, and rising up and revolting because you had no mobility. And because our founding fathers, that was the opposite. They had everything. These were the
everything.
elites who fought for revolution, and they were fighting against tyranny. They weren't fighting against poverty. And
Right.
so what we have now in this country is, you can come into this country or start off with absolutely nothing and become a billionaire. There are many people, and become famous, because the top
become president.
Become president. Yes.
Yep.
You can
not as an immigrant, but look at, Bill Clinton, absolutely nothing, and Abe Lincoln, and sorry, but yes,
yeah, no,
exactly right.
Absolutely. And the reverse is true as well. You can start off with, seemingly having everything handed to you, and lose it all. And because of that, they've swapped out, the pecuniary card with the race card, because the race card can't be changed. And then they create the intersectionality so that you have all the being interlinked. But I say all this to say that they are creating a color. I mean, I kind of think we've already experienced it, but it's incumbent upon us to fight back against the color revolution that has gone underway, and that is the culture. So I think that's really tantamount. And then on the other hand, we have these policies that they're pushing through because they do have power, and because there's so much corruption. And the corruption, to me, is, you can look at the individual list of things they're doing, like with HR1 and with the border crisis, and with the transgender bills, and all of these different, the list is on and on. I mean, I wake up every morning and it's really hard to keep up. But who am I kidding? It's like I go to the gym for an hour and I missed the whole country collapsing because something else has passed. But
it's hour by hour.
But I think it's not so. But I think that really, like, if we were to try and look at the crux of all that, the problem is the corruption. And none of these policies, if you go list by list, we can't fight each one until that's really kind of uprooted or cleaned out and dealt with. So those are my kind of how I see it in the broad sense. I mean, you can go through it. Obviously, there's so much under that and inside that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree about the culture. Absolutely. And yeah, and the whole Marxist thing, workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains, whatever. Well, the workers of the world, once they industrial revolution and so on, actually were pretty good with everything. And so that wasn't working. And the development of the middle class just gutted that whole, as you say, the class structure that to rise up against. And so they had to replace it with something more immutable, like race. And then it's just absolutely everything to do with one's identity, right? Gender, and 76 genders. So there's all these, just the whole intersectionality is complete chaos. But yes, they had to replace class with everything else, really.
Yeah.
And pit one group against another group. It's full on balkanizing, it's divide and conquer, and so on. So they've made complete chaos and destroying identity as they go. So yeah, it is. I definitely agree. Much has to be fought. And I use the word fight, in its context. Obviously, we have to fight the culture war as well. And I think we are. As far as the political, I think it's, Breitbart said politics is downstream from culture. So what we're seeing in those policies is just another vehicle for advancing all of that stuff. All of it. And open borders is also to destroy culture. Open borders is also, everything that they're passing has another nefarious purpose. And HR1, obviously, it really is just going to destroy everything. But the idea of, I don't think one will ever rid anything of corruption. I
would agree with you. I don't think, maybe I should have reworded that, but I think it's that it's become, you always have some corruption.
But it's operating via corruption now.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, right. And that's
so the mechanism as opposed to the cancer, one
right.
It
really is the mechanism, and they stand up there with pride, doing it. Nancy Pelosi is just the absolute face of corruption, even as she spews, and I'm a Catholic and I believe in the Constitution, and it just makes one's skin crawl for the. If ever a lightning bolt were to strike because of somebody's you've hit your limit as to your human limit of flat out lying, it would be right at Nancy Pelosi. So yeah, it is the mechanism by which everything is done, which again, when you study about the Constitution and the founding fathers and all the checks and balances they tried to put in to make sure it doesn't happen this way, and yet it has been happening this way, and they've been just chipping away. Federal overreach, obviously, legislative branch is destroyed, the judicial branch means nothing anymore. And I guess if you consider all that part and parcel of the entire governance system has been corrupted, it's how far we've come from the founding tenets. So what I said, my biggest, America is not America anymore, and that's absolutely one reason we've gotten so far from it. We each have our favorite pet amendment that's destroyed things, but overall, it's. Yeah, the federal government has gotten too strong. States governments have abdicated too much. People don't feel empowered anymore. We've lost our voices, even while they scream democracy. We're never intended to be a democracy. God being gone, right? I mean, even the founding fathers knew without a moral compass of religion, this whole thing wasn't going to work. And our conversation about values and virtues, it's exactly what we're seeing. Those things are gone, which is why Black Lives Matter works, which is why Kamala Harris can openly, proudly say, I donate to this organization that bails out the rioters who were just put in jail. And people go, oh, isn't she just a wonderful person? So it's all corrupted. Yeah, I'm with you on the corruption when I see it that way. America has lost a moral compass.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. No, that's not true. We do know. We know where to steer. They also know where to steer. It's not that they don't know. They know where to steer and choose, again, with malice aforethought, to steer it in another direction.
And it's so interesting. I just had this thought. I think I was saying this the other night about, how a lot of people like to say I'm socially liberal but fiscally conservative. And
Right.
when we're talking about like the founding fathers and knowing they needed to have that moral compass woven into the founding documents, and that's why we were founded on Judeo-Christian values.
Right.
But what's so interesting, I had said the other night that you can't extricate one from the other, and they knew this. Even think when you talk about free markets, if you were to leave human nature to run free markets, greed is going to be greed, ambition, that's going to be at the forefront. And so that's going to take over free markets. You're going to have monopolies that are created as a result. It is the moral compass and the moral the moral checks and balance, really,
Yeah.
or the morality, I should say, that is the checks and balance for what would happen if free markets were to just run amok by virtue of human nature. And
Right.
that is why they go hand in hand. You can't just have secular, and that's not to say, I believe there are individuals who are secular or atheistic who are capable of having strong moral compass, but I don't think societies are, because that you need that woven in order to say, here are, for lack of a better way of putting it, here are the 10 commandments. And so you cannot violate these, no matter what, economic policies or just general policies you want to implement.
Or its provenance, where the 10 commandments came from. I don't care if Moses or Joe, not Joe, bad name, Mike. Not a fan of Joe right now. It doesn't matter where they came from. Can you argue with these? But no, you're not allowed to have them. But also, you just sparked a thought. Without the moral compass or values, without the moral values, you're going to make entirely different decisions. But not only are they saying we reject religion, and I agree with you, you can have a moral code, right and wrong, without religion. But there's a rejection of the very idea that there's a right and a wrong.
Yes.
And that's a real problem. As soon as you say, Jerry Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that. Well, actually, there are a lot of things wrong with a lot of things. And we, there's no reason 5 men can't be as good as parenting as a mom and dad. Well, maybe not the 5 guys, but generally speaking, it works best. It works best. That's all. Nobody's saying it shouldn't be any other way, but that works best. I'm sorry, that works best. Other things can also be possible. But as soon as you reject the idea that anything is as good as anything else, which is generally what they say, right? Then that's what, so they're not just devoid of a moral code or compass. They're rejecting the idea that there even should be something like a moral code or compass.
Yes. The thing I hear a lot is perception is reality. Well, actually, no. Perception is your perception, and reality is reality. Facts are reality. And that's not to say that we're always privy to what is reality. We can only see through our perception, but that doesn't negate reality.
Right, definitely. And we can be aware that our own lens contributes something.
Sure.
But that's not to say that the thing that we're examining doesn't have its own properties. So and they reject the very idea that there is a reality. Well, that's not my reality. Well, it is a reality. We had Warren, just to the other point, we had Warren Farrell speak at our school shooting conference. Warren Farrell was I think he was the first spokesman for National Organization of Women. He was a major leftist, and and they loved him and he loved them and he was their spokesperson. And they said, it would be great as if you went out and did a study, he's a psychologist, study on how kids raised in, I guess it was just by a single mom compared to kids raised by a mom and dad. And he, awesome. This is great. This is going to be a chance to show that there's really no difference and any kind of family structure is as good as anything else. And he came back with his findings, which are on the contrary, kids need a dad, and they shut him out just completely. So the reality wasn't their reality. They wanted to hang on to their reality. He went to where the science was, to what the data showed, and they completely rejected him. So
you always know when a social scientist finds the antithesis of their hypothesis that it really is real.
Yeah, right. Because he really, and he talks about this. He was excited to be able to prove this, and yeah, it really is telling when they react to you that way. He was very strong on the left, but this idea that anything is as good as anything else, and therefore, if we say something is better than something else, we're the intolerant ones, we're the hateful ones. We have to be canceled, purged, negated because we are all these bad things. But the bottom line is, if you do this, for example, about the kids, what's best for the kids? Why are we not focusing on, really, why are we not focusing on that? Why is it your truth versus our truth? Why don't we still hold in our hands this desire and in our hearts this desire to do best by the kids? Why do we throw it out, right? This is how the agenda drivenness, where the agenda is the left, just tramples right over the lives and hearts and souls and minds of children. And we see this in every way over and over again. They never have the kids' best interests at heart, not ever. It's always their agenda. And we see this today with schools closed and them living in these bubbles and sitting one to a table in the cafeteria. The cruelty of this, that they know is a lie, while their teachers are on the beach in Mexico, and unions are putting up all kinds of fights against reopening. Not for a second are they thinking about the kids. So anyway, that's my other tangent, is that's, what's horrible, what's going on right now, the destruction of the children. I just I can't bear it. And they do this in furtherance of their own agenda without a single thought to the kids.
Yeah. And it's definitely intentional because they're looking for their next crop of voters and activists and facilitate their agenda.
It's unbearable. Even as they crow about, they're the ones who have the kids' best interests at heart. And they claim that that's their purpose. We're in it for the kids. No, you're so not. You are so not.
And based on results, right? Carl Jung said that a really good way to determine someone's intentions is to look at the outcome.
Look at the outcome. And God knows what the outcome of this past year and continuing is going to be for the kids, for all of us, for the country as a whole. The border is open. They're flooding in. Without any health checks, and Border Patrol, I think 50% of Border Patrol is now, not 50, that's not right. 50% are testing positive, but a lot of the Border Patrol are sick. So, but they're not allowed to do anything about it. And yet we are restricted from seeing our dying parents in hospitals. And yet they're driving sick, illegal immigrants and depositing them all over the country. So,
and what's going to happen? This is mind-boggling to me. As usual, the hypocrisy, but they're letting these people flood in. I think Candace Owens was one who posted something about, her, because her husband is British, and when mom's going to be able to see her, and she said the best way to do this would be, to fly to Mexico and run over the border. Which is, it's too real to be funny, but what is going to happen? They're letting people just run into the country,
Yes.
through the border, but
Yes.
now they're all these other countries are putting sanctions on whether we can come to them, or vice versa, whether people can legally come and have visas here, and they have to go through all these hoops, and some people can't, and they're trying to make that more stringent with all the COVID testing, and with pushing the vaccines, and all the different sanctions that they're putting in place. But why do people not see the complete disconnect, the complete blatant hypocrisy of that?
No, they don't. No. And Europeans can't come in, right? Europeans can't come in without all kinds of, they can't, they don't get visas. And we know why that is. They don't want Europeans in. And so they want to see, and the other part of it, I would say too, more to the nefariousness, Texas had mandated a week or two ago, no more masks, we're open for business. Florida too, I think Arizona too. So where are they putting everybody? In these states.
Yep.
So that provides a nice convenient way of saying, look, you guys opened up and look what's happening. Where what they've actually done is brought in infection. So yeah, the question, really, you're right. The question is, don't people see that? And I don't know. And I think people mentally try very hard to make excuses for it. Well, it was really bad in Mexico, and so we should really be providing a haven for them. Okay, but what about letting them in if they're sick? Well, they're sick, we're going to give them better health care, but we're setting them loose, and well, I'm sure they have a plan, right? It's too inconceivable. It's inconceivable that this is done. And they just this morning, I think, released photos of these kids in cages down at the border. And it's so horrendous. And this is, but thank God we have Biden, because he's going to, kids in cages. No, it's so much worse. It's infinitely worse. Plus, they're all coming over saying they were told to come over, which Trump just kept saying, don't come. Right. So if they came, that's an entirely different story. But to lure them over with promises of things, and then, but it's to destabilize our population. It's to bring in infection. He's showing governors. I mean, a lot of this is a power play against governors.
Yeah. The federal versus the states battle.
Right. So it's just despicable on so many levels. But then, why are we broken? Because states have ceded too much power to the federal government. So my hope is that, as it always is, the worse it gets, the more people wake up and see it, and the more people stand up to it. So if he's overriding states as he is, in so many ways, immigration, HR1, everything, the pipeline, that they really do start banding together and fight it. And I think we are seeing that. And that's where I think I have hope, in that people are waking up in the culture and being louder and more active, but also states I hope are starting to exert their sovereignty more, which is where more needs to be. It's never intended for the federal government to have that much power. So I'm hoping that the worse he gets, and the greater the he and the cackler, the worse they get, the more states will start exerting sovereignty. And I hope they start banding together and doing that, and saving the country. Again, they're fighting. The left has been fighting. They've been, as you said, we've been involved in a revolution. It's been happening. It's slow motion. It's like it's sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but it's been happening. And so that's been happening. But I think the resistance is gonna start, because you either resist again or you surrender, and we've surrendered long enough. And I think Biden is that agenda on steroids. And I'm expecting that it's lighting a lot of fires under people's bottoms to get them to act. That's my hope.
Yeah, no, that is my hope as well. I just had a thought. So this Biden-Harris, or sometimes Harris administration, as he refers to it, I, I'm certainly not the only one thinking that, there's a possibility that Biden may not survive this entire presidency, or even, or at the very least be capable of running this whole. So I wonder when, or how long it will be before Harris would take over. And I wonder if that's part of why they're referring to it as this, Biden, to kind of acclimate us, if you will.
Yeah. Ease the transition.
Yeah.
Because I think we had been hypothesizing she was going to wait, or they were going to wait, not him, but whoever, till right after 2 years, when then she could be reelected, and then a second time.
Yeah.
I think we're talking weeks, months after the steps, and I would say that too. It is about acclimating. Again, they would never say that, but it also may be revealing. People talked about using the 25th Amendment. I don't think that will need to be done. Just say, Joe, it's been fun, and now it's her. And
yeah, I don't think he has enough power, enough
anything,
his own power to be any kind of opposition. It would
no. I don't think they want it to be like that. And maybe the Biden-Harris is signaling that it won't be like that. That they're in this together.
Yeah.
There's no hostilities. Nobody's going to unseat him. We love him. He's wonderful. But there may come a day when somebody starts talking about, Joe had trouble today, and then just, then sort of segue him out in a gentler way. I never thought it was going to be a hostile thing.
Right.
They're two
Sure.
seemingly buddy from the beginning of all of this. And that, I think calling it Biden-Harris, Harris-Biden, whatever, is showing that there's no hostility, and it's going to go through in a much smoother way. Not to worry. They've both got this. And maybe it's, there's a cadre of people who weirdly voted for him knowing it would be okay because she was there. I can't fathom that, but I know, people who really thought that, and who this actually gives them a she's got his back.
Okay. If that reassures them, it's not all that comforting for me, but
no, it's
somebody. I'm curious what then happens, because is there any possibility anybody's going to bring up the fact that she's not legitimate? Is there anybody
not a natural born citizen?
Yeah. I mean, is there any? I actually, and I will admit, I'm not sure. I've done a little digging, but it's pretty hard to find whether she was even, could be legitimate as a vice president, because it's, understood that a vice president might have to take on presidential.
Right. No, if you believe she's not qualified because of the qualifications in the Constitution, which include natural born citizen, if you believe she's not qualified in that regard to be president, definitely not vice president, because what would be the point?
Right.
From all the digging I have done, she is not, because natural born means of parents. It's not native born. It's not naturalized. It's natural born, had meaning at that time. And there's been decisions since then. I think Vattel, I don't remember the year, was the guy who wrote about this. When they put natural born in the Constitution, they all knew what it meant. It had very specific meaning. They didn't have a need to define it because everybody knew what it meant. And what it means is, it doesn't matter where you are born. It has to do with whether or not your parents were citizens or had allegiances to other countries. Both hers did. Neither of her parents was an American citizen. One was they were both students. One was a student. They were here on student visas.
Right.
They weren't even like green card holders. They were not in the process of becoming citizens.
Right.
So she was born of parents who had allegiances elsewhere. By the way, same with Obama. One of them was his mom, but not his father. So whether or not he was born in Hawaii or Kenya, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
One parent was not a natural born citizen. With her, neither of them are. There is actually a lawsuit.
Oh, interesting.
At least one that I know of. It's hard to get traction, for obvious reasons.
Sure.
So, and we tend to not really fight these things. And it may just be, as we're learning, is something constitutional or not, our feeling that it is or isn't has sort of become not as relevant as if they decide that it is or isn't. And if say the case were to go to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says, yeah, well, it's unclear, we just decide that she is natural born citizen, sort of de facto has come to mean this. As we keep saying, after the Supreme Court decides, you have no recourse. So I don't know how one fights it, I guess, is the long and short of it.
If it were to be, and I guess it's kind of not, it's really a playing a what if game, but I'm curious if it were to go through those channels and they were to, as we saw with the previous election, that it's not likely, but if it were to, then what would that mean? Would they need to then, who would be president, right? Would it be Nancy Pelosi?
It would be Nancy. It would be Nancy. But I think, as with the last decision, they are so, and because of your point, if she can't be president, could she be vice president?
Right.
They're so unwilling to undo things that are already done. And she's already been elected. Obama was already elected.
Right.
Why were no suits brought up then? Why has this issue been sloughed over? Do things just sort of change de facto and then nobody wants to upset the apple cart? And I think that the Supreme Court, generally speaking, doesn't want to upset anything. The people chose her, natural born. Well, we could interpret it this other way. Just as Obamacare, well, it kind of was a tax if you really think about it, right? They're willing to mush around on anything to go along to get along and to not be disruptive. And the people, they let the people decide. The people chose Kamala out of complete, well, actually, who knows? The people didn't actually choose Kamala.
They didn't actually.
And nor did they choose Biden, right? But they don't, they're, back to the word of the day, they're cowards.
Yeah. And I think that this idea of, deciding de facto is a real concern, because I don't think that was ever meant to be set up. I think our founders understood that there are mistakes that are made, right? Yeah. So are we supposed to then, for, the perpetuity of this nation, just be beholden to the mistakes that were made, and therefore they just lie, and the precedence has been set, and therefore nothing can be done? That's really dangerous. I mean, I think it's equally dangerous, not to consider precedents that could be set, which is why you bring these things to court and hopefully to the Supreme Court, and hopefully they listen and they do something at the time. But we're humans. We are imperfect. We make mistakes, and we are also byproducts of, our spatial and temporal realm, right? So as a result, things do change, and we may not see things clearly at that time, and be given the circumstances. So there needs to be retribution. There needs to be ways to rectify, and in order to restore, to restore. Right.
There does. And we keep, exactly. And that's that's kind of the despairing thing when we talk, three branches and checks and balances and balance of power and all of that. There's really no way to get there's literally no way to overturn a Supreme Court decision. You can come in with other decisions that may be sort of tangentially similar, and you can have amendments, but you can't undo a thing. There's no veto of a Supreme Court decision. And it's a very helpless feeling, especially when they're not adjudicating according to the Constitution, but according to today. And as we keep saying, they've just become the judicial, another piece of the legislative branch.
Right.
And I never thought when we talk about Supreme Court justices, and Amy Coney Barrett was this, and this, and she, constitutionally, she was fabulous and all her answers were great. But questions that need to be asked are you a courageous person? Tell us about a case where you overturned something because you felt it was the right thing to do. Tell us about a case that you think should be overturned. Tell us a case where you took a stand against something that you felt was unconstitutional. And then another question that I would ask is, do you have young children?
This is what just came to my mind. So I had someone tell me that, and I don't know if this is true, but I would believe it. Maybe someone told me that our founders, their children were not only threatened, but tortured, and they still fought. I don't know, like I have not corroborated this, but if this is true, that's just such a clear picture of the dichotomy of where we're at today, because it takes like one small threat and for all integrity to be lost,
or even a hint of a threat.
That's what I'm saying,
yeah, any kind of just glancing word of minor.
And I'm not saying we should
intimidation
be
right, but no, right. And I that's interesting about the founders. That surprises me. It may have happened. Was it as a general rule? Was it, are we talking pre-victory?
Yeah, pre-victory.
It was by the British?
By the British, exactly.
It was by the British. Okay.
Yep.
I've no doubt that the British, did bad things, and war is awful. But yeah, the difference, and they fought anyway, and ours, just a whisper of anything and they capitulate. I really do think the young kids thing does play a role. I really do. And it wouldn't even take much. It could be, your daughter's friends are going to hate her if your decision, if you overturn a legitimate election,
Right.
It doesn't even have to be bigger than that.
This is where I go back to, just the values in the home, because I really, not to bring back to me, but I mean, that's my frame of reference,
Yeah.
So like, I remember as a child, I mean, I was bullied, I was ostracized because of all of my challenges, and lots of kids are. This isn't to say that I was so special or unique in this regard, but I did have circumstances that most children don't deal with, and I was mainstream, so it was very unusual for those children to bear witness to that sort of thing. And the thing my parents always told me were, as long as you have real friends, that's all that matters. You're going to be liked by everyone. That is not the goal. And nobody has, the people who look like, that's the thing they always told me, the people who look like they have all these friends are really just acquaintances.
Right.
Nobody really has that many close friends. And
right.
that's what was important in life, is knowing that you had people who knew who you were and would stand up for you. They would defend you because they knew your heart, they knew your soul, and they cared about you. And that was important, not winning the popularity contest. And I mean, I really, that's not to say, I mean, I'm human, and I've certainly been victim of, we want to be liked. Like and we want to be liked for biological reasons because, although we are so many thousands of years from our, primordial ancestors, if you were left out of the tribe, that might mean that a bear could come eat you or
you die. Yeah.
You die. And
yeah.
we're tribal creatures. And so that's why we take emotional assaults, feel physical. It's left over from, our survival instincts. So, we all are victim of that, but there was this sense that, this is more important. And so, yes, I'd like everybody to like me, but it's not going to be a reality. And so I need to know who my real people are.
Right.
And I say all of this just to say that started in the home. That was something my parents taught me, from a really young age. And I think that's something when you're saying like this hint of, like your kids' friends may not like them because you overturned the election. They may tease your daughter. And that's supposed to be why we capitulate and we lose all sense of integrity.
Right. Well, I'm hypothesizing, right? I mean, I'm not saying
that's I'm
not
right. But we can
clarify. But if your children are threatened somehow, maybe they, hate to see your kid kicked out of that school or,
right.
Whatever, who knows what it is. It's always known that a way to get to people is through their children, through their family, one way or another.
I think more that my point was though, why isn't the reverse being taught to fortify the children that, their real friends will be their real friends, that their family still loves and cares about them, that, standing up for what's right isn't always popular. That's what I'm saying. That was just a hypothesis.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. And the flip side, corollary, are you a good friend?
Yeah.
Are you, so back to loyalty, are you loyal to your friends? And now we're back to the virtues and teaching your children what's important for them and also how to be. And that's good armor also against all the slings and arrows that are sent our way. Any child of any conservative has to get some of that armor.
Yeah.
Really, we are in the way of a lot of stuff. Our lives are made to be very unhappy. Not unhappy, but they do aim at us and they want to take us down. And you read story after story, teacher after teacher, the baker, everybody is under attack if you're on the right. So we all need to be fortified however we can. And certainly loyal friends are crucial to all that. Yeah, I don't know. How do we balance out the Supreme Court? I don't mean balance it politically. I mean, deal with decisions that they make that are not really according to the Constitution. Federalism. We need to empower states to annul, to nullify. And, again, we're back to empowering states exerting their sovereignty. If HR 1 does pass, for certainly Texas, Florida, Tennessee, all the red states are going to say, nope, not doing it. So the beginnings of non-compliance, I think, I hope.
Yeah, no, I think that's really the ticket. And then I think there's one other thing I wanted to touch on. We talked about it a little bit before we pressed record. But because I think this is a very important point for patriots, for conservatives, is to adjudicate where their line is.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're talking about the Supreme Court. And I think this is kind of a pervasive struggle. Is we either capitulate all or draw such a hard line and give up on I guess the expression would be like to throw away the baby with the bathwater kind of
right
thing.
Right.
So I think that that's kind of, and it's going to be, that's a very broad, obviously it's going to be different for each circumstance, but I think there needs to be some sort of guidelines for people to know where their lines are. Right. I think that is, I think it's important. I think it's an important thing for people to learn, to have a sense of, to at least start to question, if we are to hold ground and if we are to find courage. You need to know which battles to pick, right? You're not going to pick right. I think we were talking about, like, not every hill is the hill to die on, but you can't, but you need to die on some hill.
On some hill, exactly right. I mean, that's what they're there for. And right, pretty soon you run out of hills and you've just completely lost. So how to pick that. Right. And there's people who have, hair triggers. This person in some speech said this thing 20 years ago, so dead to me, not a true whatever. So I think you had said the word, and I use this all the time too. We have these, some people, I don't, but people have purity tests, and, people are one issue people, and boom, they said this, I'm not ever going to have anything to do with them. Or those who will just forgive anything because they have an R. And there are those, and in certain circumstances, any R is better than any D. I think overall that, if you're counting and you need a majority in the House or the Senate, because that majority dictates everything. So, again, these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. In certain circumstances, I will put up with someone who's an R, but not my favorite, just because we need that majority.
Sure.
Differently than if we've got this gigantic majority, now you can sort of whittle away at, the less. So it's kind of the gross tuning and then the fine tuning.
Right.
In a sense, you just need to get in the ballpark first, and now you use the other dial and you can, hone in a little bit better. But we're all different, and all this, it's not just which is that thing. I just remember a book about relationships, and it began this way. So you're thinking about buying a house. This is, do you stay in this relationship or do you get out of this relationship? And it works for all these circumstances. You want to buy a house, you're familiar with this, and you want, X number of bedrooms and fireplaces and this many square feet and all of this stuff, and everything. And you find a house and it's got this and this and this, and yes, everything is perfect. But there's one tiny little problem, and that it's built on a nuclear waste dump. So none of the rest matters, and it's just this one thing. But this is that thing that ruins everything. And so I think we each have our one thing. For some, it's pro-life. For some, it's immigration. Obviously, Ann Coulter, it was all about the wall. For others, it's, who knows what it is. So some people are the one issue people. And they're just like that. And I understand that. And I guess we each just have to decide. And that's why, it's kind of a beautiful thing that we have primaries, we come together, we, eventually sort it all out. One hopes. But then things get in the way, like lack of term limits, like money, like unions, like all those corrupting influences that you say. But, yeah, there's the one issue versus the no issue.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess, to paraphrase, I don't know how to describe it, but I know it when I see it, not because I know it, but because that's how I feel.
Right.
And during the primary in 2016, I had made, you'll like this, I had made a matrix. There were 17 candidates or whatever. I made a matrix of those things that were important to me.
Love that.
It was pretty great. And then I just checked the boxes, and this was my calculus of it. And number one, and I said, I never would have said this until Obama, must love America. Yeah. Must know how to deal with the media, must value our military, must have, done something in support of our military. I would have liked someone who had some military service or had family in the military, spoke about the importance of education, understood various tiers of governance, which I've always felt was important. It doesn't want to be a federal power grab, so is comfortable saying, that's an interesting question, but it's really not relevant for the presidency. I wish more of them would say that. I don't know why you're asking me about this, because that's not
Trump did. He said it often. Yeah.
As president, but not when he was running, but as president, yeah. Yeah, right. No, absolutely. And I love that. I love that. He understood, and he understood. So when I was doing my checklist during the primaries, all of those, and then you just check them. But again, there might have been somebody on it who was actually a nuclear. You couldn't just count checks and say he won, according to me. So you have to put weights on,
right, what
are the most important things. But yeah, and some people, we just say, I just don't like them. I just don't like that this person is loud or quiet, or or his hair. It's funny. I don't know how. So some apply logic, some apply emotion, some apply, my favorite one, I don't like him, but I think he's the one who can win. Right? That's just such a weird one. I don't like him, but I think other people do. Or conversely, I like this guy, but I don't think he can win. Right? What kind of mental weirdness is that?
I hear that a lot. That's really
right.
Funny. It sounds ludicrous because, well, what are you doing to help him win?
right.
Or what are you doing to help him lose?
Right, exactly. It's just,
when did we become by default?
Right, and it's kind of this anti-projection, and part of that is, I think I'm smarter than everybody else.
Which is ironic, because you're doing absolutely nothing. You're so smart. You've just defaulted to everyone else.
Exactly. So you've just given them the power.
Yeah. And if you're so smart, maybe you should be part of the solution, not, abdicate all responsibility.
I know. So all of this, it really just shows the life's rich tapestry, and what an unbelievable range of everything is the human being.
Yeah, so what really struck me when you were talking about your little matrix, which is super, super awesome, but it kind of goes back full circle, though. You started off by saying that, I guess kind of like Jordan Peterson's rule for life, get your house in order, make your bed, is very much how a lot of conservatives operate.
Yeah.
But I think there is a lot of validity, because yes, you then need to also do civic duty, because that's part of your having your house in order. But part of the problem I see is that most people couldn't make this matrix. As you said, they would say, well, I don't know, I like his hair, or I don't like his hair.
I know.
Or other people like him, or other people don't like him. And what that really boils down to is people not knowing themselves. And it sounds strange to say we're dealing with politics, well, you need to understand who you are and what's important to you. But politics is about governing people, and it's individuals. So it starts at the individual level, and that's what Western civilization is predicated on, is the value of the individual. And if the individual has, and so I like, this is the perfect culmination of all of it, where the root of the problem is that we have destroyed the value of the individual. So the individual, and it's not to say all individuals, but many individuals have lost sense of self and sense of individuality, and therefore they don't know what their priorities are. They don't know what's important to them, and they don't know what hill to die on.
Right. And absolutely, just yes, about taking care of our own lives, which is why I do support the Little League people, but also what you're saying about what's important to you. One of the when my contract wasn't renewed, and for political reasons or whatever, and I had written as a rebuttal for this, that I had told my students, my seniors who were 18 years old, about to vote for the first time. Right. I said, I encouraged them to decide for themselves what's important to them in a president. Don't let anybody else tell you what they think is important. You need to decide for yourself what's important in a president. Then do your own research and listen to them and watch the debates and read and hear their own words, and you decide for yourself whom to support, and then just vote and make sure your voice is heard. That's what I said. So this comes back in the I had written this in one of the legal things. They responded, they cited that. They didn't rebut it. They cited that and said, we can't have her indoctrinating young children, and something about imposing my views.
I'm like, wow.
Right? So exactly what you said about just deciding for yourself what's important. This is exactly what I encourage. And that is the individual, nothing about me, nothing.
About
in fact,
who to vote for, what party, what
nothing. The day after Trump won, I had students come to me, one of the few teachers in the school, because the rest were home crying, and said, gosh, Dr. Siegemund, I can imagine how bad you must feel. So they didn't know.
Right.
They didn't know.
Wow.
So I had told them, decide for yourself and make sure your voice is heard. These are to adults, 18 years old. I'm indoctrinating young children. And to your point about they want to obliterate the individual, the reason that was problematic was it gave credence to the notion that there's another legitimate side.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Just that. Just that there's a decision that could be made.
Yep. Wow. Just the fact that there is a decision that could be made, that they had a choice, that they have options.
Right?
Wow. That's astounding.
And of course I had to be purged. You can't go around telling kids stuff like that.
Don't think for yourself.
Don't think for yourself.
For you.
Don't think for yourself. They didn't even rebut it. They didn't say that's not what you did.
Wow.
They took that.
And they quoted you.
And they quoted me and called it indoctrination of children.
And they're not children. 18-year-olds are not.
They're 18-year-olds. They're not children. And I think we were talking about this. They want to lower it to 16.
Yeah, they do.
Right? And so the idea that you have a choice, because to them, there's only the one true anointed one, and that was Hillary.
Right.
And to even imply that they might have thoughts about what a president should be other than the first woman, obviously it should be her, and whatever all else their narrative was, for me to imply that there's another way of thinking, had got to get rid of you.
Have to go. And it's not because you suggested there was an alternative to, you didn't suggest what one versus the other. It was just think for yourself.
You decide.
What resonates for you.
You decide and you be active on it. And I would find whatever cause. Make a difference I didn't tell them in what way. That's
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. It's still, I walk around my house, I'm doing this or that, and I just, every now and then it just crosses my mind and I chuckle. I just can't even, I chuckle or I get enraged. It's hard to believe.
See where that would be the vicissitudes would be very extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no rebuttal. Just
that you indoctrinate it by telling them they should think for themselves. It's interesting because I always say, we talk, the media is with, I personally, I think you agree, the media is the enemy of the people right now.
Absolutely right.
And it's because I think they are destroying critical thinking because people are they're spoon-fed what to think instead of how to think. And I always think about how this again goes back to values that can start in the home. This is why they have to destroy the family.
Right.
It does start with, and I remember, I took 2 years. I started college as a neuroscience major, and I had switched to philosophy. And 2 years in, I finally got up the nerve to tell my parents that I had switched to philosophy. And my dad said, "Why did you take so long to tell us that you switched your major?" And I said, "Well, I thought you'd be really disappointed in me. I went from neuroscience to philosophy." My dad said, "Why would we be upset that you wanted to learn how to think?"
Oh,
right?
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, "That's such a great answer, Dad." I'm like, "I'm so glad you see it that way, because
Seriously.
I was like, this was just fun for me, So, I mean, I had a lot of reasons that I switched, but it speaks volumes to there are very few parents that would teach their kids that, that we want you to learn how to think, not what to think. That you
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, it was very frowned upon.
Yes. Well, I think that kind of sums it up. I don't know if you have anything else. I'm sure there could be a few years worth more, and I'm sure we'll do it again. But
great fun, Courtney. Really.
So fun. Is there anything else you want to add or close off with, or?
No, my goodness, we've been talking a while. Yeah, we'll talk again.
So
thanks so much. A real pleasure.
Thank you.